So, Brandon, we are actually going to do something a little different, and I'm excited about it. You have an idea that you would like to walk us through a series on Mr. Clive Staples Lewis.
Yes, his government name.
His government. You got to call him by his government. His mama called him Clive, I'm going to call him Clive.
That's right.
Which is also, we know him as the great C.S. Lewis,
Yes.
and you're going to be sharing a series with lessons that you've learned from him.
Yes.
So, yeah. Why don't you tell us about why you wanted to talk about it and just walk us through, I guess, an overview of the series.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. It's C.S. Lewis is one of those names that are so popular within Christianity, and for many of us, his work was so formative through apologetics, through evangelism, through just understanding the faith better. And I remember early on, well over a decade ago, maybe 15 years or so ago, when I was first reading Mere Christianity, it really resonated with me like no other work that I had ever read. He was so meticulous in going through some of the high level or some of the most poignant parts of the Christian faith and all these Christian themes that we know and we read and we learn about, but the way that he's able to apply them in an everyday way. Like he would talk about one subject and then he would give an illustration or an analogy, but he would give an analogy that would resonate with all of our lived experiences. And so it not only helped us to understand it better, but to also communicate it to others when they ask about the faith. So I thought it would be helpful to do a mini-series called Learning from Lewis. And this series will be 3 episodes after this sort of overview, where I talk about 3 parts of Mere Christianity that really resonated with me early on in my spiritual and faith journey. After I have the privilege of giving different apologetics or evangelism talks, the question that I always get, no doubt about it, is what is a good book recommendation? And some of those are based upon the needs or the desires or the personal preferences of the person asking. But then there are some works that are just evergreen, meaning that they have this transcendent quality, and I think every Christian should read them. And Mere Christianity is one of those. So let me give a little bit of background on Mere Christianity that I don't think a lot of people know about. So here's the book here. Well, this is actually a compilation of C.S. Lewis's works, and one of them is Mere Christianity. But we receive it now in book form. But it didn't start out that way. Actually, C.S. Lewis, he had this series of BBC broadcasts. These were recorded during the early 1940s and the early parts of World War II. And what happened eventually is that they became so popular that he just collected them all into a work. And initially, that small work was called Broadcast Talks. But as the popularity increased, he recorded more of these talks that would be some of the later chapters that we now know as Mere Christianity, and he eventually compiled it in 1952 into one book that we now know as Mere Christianity. So over these next three videos, I want to talk about, again, 3 things that really resonated with me. And the 3 ways in which they really resonated with me was by helping my outward witness, my inward witness, and then one that kind of mixes both together. But before I do that, I want to talk more broadly about 4 reasons that why I think Mere Christianity is a book that everyone should read. One of those is that it helps ground theological subjects. Now, for a lot of people, theology can feel like a very intellectual exercise or endeavor. It can feel very heady. Now, I would argue that rationality and intellectualism has always been foundational to the Christian faith, from the early parts of scriptures to the New Testament to the early church fathers and so on and so forth. But I get it. For some of us, we're not predisposed to want to really dive into some of these deeper subjects. Well, what C.S. Lewis does is he takes these things and makes them very practical and grounds them, again, like I mentioned earlier, in our everyday experiences. Second of all, he helps us use our imagination. Now, you might be saying to yourself, Brandon, you're talking about Mere Christianity. We're not talking about Chronicles of Narnia with the lion Aslan or some other fictional, fabled work. No, but imagination is key to the Christian faith. Professor Holly Ordway, she has a book called Apologetics and the Christian Imagination. And she said at the most basic level, the imagination is what allows us to conceive in our minds the image of something that is not present. Now, that might sound familiar to you. You see, the writer of Hebrews in Hebrews chapter 11, verses 1 said, "Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen." You see, our imagination, like faith, should be founded upon and ultimately shaped by the truth of Scripture. And this will allow us to be stronger believers. You see, to imagine and live out the Christian reality of hope that surpasses this life means that we have to imagine these things. For example, Jesus talked about heaven, but we don't have a lot of information about what heaven will look like or what we'll be doing in heaven. But he's given us enough information that we can trust in what he says, and we can imagine and hope for the beauty that he has for those who believe and have trust in him. Next, he helps our evangelistic efforts. Not only is he helping us through the practical grounding of these theological subjects to better understand them ourselves, but we're also better able to communicate them to others. I mean, face it, a lot of us, I certainly had this happen in my life. We get the opportunity to share our faith, but we don't take that opportunity because we're in fear of what someone might ask us, or we're scared that they might present some evidence that we don't quite know how to answer. And so Lewis not only helps us to understand these theological subjects better, but he actually has a chapter entitled Some Objections, where he's talking about a theme, and that theme being morality, which will be the next subject that the next video that I talk about. But he anticipates some of the objections that we receive and how to respond to them. But it's not just applicable for that one subject or that one theme. The way he does it helps us to apply that more broadly to any objections that we may get from people who are curious about the faith. And finally, I think mere Christianity actually helps to bring us closer to Christ. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not putting it on par with Scripture or anything like that. But it's clear that the Lord uses books like these to help us along our spiritual journey. For example, for me, the late Pastor Adrian Rogers of Love Worth Finding, his sermon entitled The Cup, the Lord used that in an incredible way in my conversion story and to bring me closer to Christ. And for example, Chuck Colson, that name might sound familiar to some folks. Well, he was once incarcerated for his involvement in Watergate. And in his biography, he talked about how influential mere Christianity was in his eventual conversion. And the list goes on and on and on of people who have cited the wonderful way in which mere Christianity has helped them to grow closer to Christ. So please, if you've never grabbed a copy of Mere Christianity, please go ahead and check it out. I know nowadays you can get it on Audible or Kindle and all that stuff. Me, I like a good old physical book. I'm kind of old school like that. But grab a copy. This will be a great opportunity to kind of read along with me. I mean, we won't go through every chapter, but we'll go through a few of the bigger subjects. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments section. If you have read Mere Christianity, maybe it's some subject that really resonated with you, or you have a question about it. I'd love for you to put that down in the chat in the chat there. But next time we'll be talking about morality and what I learned from what Lewis taught on that. Thank you.
Thanks for watching Everyday Theology. For more content like this, be sure to hit the subscribe button.